Hi, my name is Kristen Fleetstra. I am the owner and operator of a company called Saddlery Solutions, which specializes in saddle fitting and finding solutions for you and your horse. Today, our lovely volunteer Inka is going to help us to demonstrate what it would look like if you booked a saddle fitting consultation with us. So one of the most important things that I can say when we go to do our initial tracings on a horse is, if you notice, we've got all 4 feet square on a level surface here. That is actually really important because we're not only going to be looking at the width and shape of your horse, but we're also going to be looking at your horse's symmetry. So I've got her all lined up, she's ready to go, and we're going to go ahead and take our initial wither tracing. We're going to come over the top with our tracer and lay it on either side of the withers, about 2 finger widths or 2 inches behind that scapula bone. After we've got our initial tracing of the horse's withers, our next step is actually do a tracing of our horse's shoulder. Something that you need to know is that horses don't have a collarbone the way that you and I do. And so what this tracing is going to do is going to let us know more about this mare and which side she prefers, which side she might be easier to trot, which side might be easier to canter, and which way her saddle might fall depending on what these shoulders do. The other reason why this tracing is so important is it also gives us a snapshot of what Inka's shoulders look like today. So if I was to come and remeasure her 6 months or a year from now, we can actually retake this tracing and say, has she gotten more symmetrical? Has she gotten more asymmetric? And is there anything that we need to do to address that? So the next measurement that we're going to take is with what's called a Springer gauge right here. One thing that I want you to notice is a difference between this measuring tool and this measuring tool is the fact that this has a level on it and this doesn't. Here, we're gonna be looking at the optimal triangle for your horse, and that's that where it fits over the horse's withers behind the shoulder. And I'm gonna go about 2 inches behind that shoulder blade in the same place that we took our tracing. And what we wanna look at is the angle of this arm and how it sits against the wither. So the next measurement that we're gonna take is using this tool right here. And what we're actually gonna be looking at is how uphill or downhill our horse is, and also how wide or narrow their back is. The other great thing about this tool is it gives us an ability to track over time so that we can know how has our horse's back changed, which is really important for horses that are in competitive work, as well as young horses that are growing and changing. So then what I wanna see with this tool is that it's aligning to my horse's spine, and also that the different arms are laying along her back. You'll notice there's a little level up here on the top. So we're just making sure that it's sitting straight along the spine so we get an even measurement on both sides of our horse. So right now, when I'm looking over Inka from the back, I can see that my tool is tipped just slightly over to her left side. So what I'm gonna do is just bring it back over to the center a little bit, just to make sure that we've got a good symmetrical measurement that we can take of the horse. So now when I take it off the horse, what we can see is the curvature of her spine and also the width along her back. So what this is going to allow us to do when we flip it over is look at what would the bottom of our saddle want to look like as compared to this measurement right here. So our last measurement that we're going to take is a really simple one, and it's just your horse's circumference. Where I like to take circumference is around the tummy, right from the base of the withers here. And I want to take that measurement right there. So for her, about 78.5 inches. The reason why this is so important is if suddenly you're noticing, hey, my saddle's not fitting, that's a really easy measurement that we can take to see if the horse has gained or lost weight. So during this whole measurement process, I'm going to be making notes and looking at what your horse's body looks like so that we can reference that to how your saddle fits. So if you're doing a consultation with me, we'll be definitely having a conversation and me explaining all of my notes to you and how they relate to your horse. Today we have Claire standing in here for us as our person who's receiving a consultation, and I'm going to explain to her a little bit what I would explain to the owner of the horse if we were talking about their particular animal. Our next step would actually be, let's grab the equipment and let's see what's going on with the equipment with our static horse, meaning our horse standing here in the cross ties, not being ridden. So before I'm going to have our rider climb on their horse, the next step that we're going to do is actually getting measurements of the rider themselves, because you are also a big part of this consultation and we want to make sure the saddle's not only fitting your horse, but you as well. Our first measurement that we're going to take is actually around the hips of the rider. So what this hip measurement gives us is it allows us to know what volume we have sitting in the actual seat of the saddle. So next measurement that we're going to take is of the rider's thigh. And we kind of want to come to the widest part of the thigh where it comes down onto the flap of the saddle. The reason why this is so important is a couple of things. We're going to be looking at the width of the flap itself that her leg is sitting on, but also your saddle has a channel from the back of the tree to the front of the tree where the thigh is meant to run. And so depending on the size of this thigh might change how long of a space that we need in the tree for the rider. Next measurement that we're going to take is a couple of lengths of the leg. So I'm going to go ahead here and go to the side of my kneecap to see what the length is on the upper leg of my rider. And I'm going to take what my lower leg is of the rider. Next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of put Claire into a dressage leg here, coming from that same spot, all the way down to sort of where the seam on her boot is, because this is about the length of her leg in a dressage flap. So that's going to give us that measurement there. I'm also going to put Claire into a jump saddle to show how we would measure the length of the leg in a jump saddle. So when we're measuring for the jump leg, what I want to do is actually put sort of where I'd want Claire to be in a jump stirrup, so that we kind of get the dressage length of her leg and the jump length of her leg. This is really important when we're working with eventing riders because they actually have to exist in both worlds. So a few things that I observed in our initial test ride of the saddle is that the saddle's wanting to pull Claire a little too far back in the saddle because the pommel is a little too high. The back of the saddle was wanting to bounce around on the mare more than I liked. And I felt like it was also, the pad was kind of crinkling up and getting moved around. So what that's telling me is that our saddle's just a little bit out of balance and not fitting properly. After watching you ride, we may assess that you need an adjustment to your current saddle. So right now I'm just going to walk you through the process of what those adjustments might be. Before we start anything, we have to do the first thing, which is measuring. And just measure across the top corner of your saddle right here so we can see how wide or narrow it is before we go ahead and adjust that tree. So on this saddle, I can see that I'm about 17 centimeters or 170 millimeters across the top of our saddle. Let's go ahead and do an adjustment. This is a saddle tree adjusting machine. It's meant to be used on flex tree saddles, which happens to be in this saddle here. There are a lot of different brands with flex tree saddles that can be adjusted right on site with you and your horse. So we go ahead and fit the saddle into the machine, and then we can see the saddle going up. This panel is going to start putting pressure to go ahead and narrow that tree. However, if we decide that your saddle is too narrow, it's a different process to go ahead and widen it. So I'm going to show you how we would widen a saddle tree. We're going to go ahead and remove this. We move our two pads up. And now we're going to put our saddle in the opposite way to go ahead and widen it. Same process, we tighten at the bottom to widen the saddle. Flex trees are not the only kind of saddle trees that can be adjusted. Wood trees have a little bit of adjustability to them, and there's also thermal adjust trees, but those trees have to be adjusted in shop, not on site, but can still totally be adjusted. So if your saddle is too wide or too narrow, there's a lot of potential that we can help you to get it fitting your horse a lot better. The other thing that I'd like to show you is saddle flocking and how we would flock your saddle. So this flocking portal is going to give us access to the back of the saddle. This flocking portal gives us access to the front of the saddle, and both of them give us access to the middle of the saddle, depending on what we need to do. Say we have a saddle that's too low in the back. What we're going to go ahead and do is access it through this back portal here, and we might take a little flocking and add it to that back portion to lift the back. Now we've lifted the back of the saddle a little bit without replacing all of the flocking in your saddle. Now say same issue, we have not enough flocking in the middle of the saddle. We can go ahead and take a little bit of wool, go to this middle portion, and with our flocking iron, add some wool in the middle of the saddle in order to fill it out there. And then also, if we want to fill out this front corner of the saddle, we have to use a slightly different flocking iron, which is this one right here. The reason that this is curved is because it needs to go up into the panel there. And so we would take a little bit of wool and we can just add it into the front portion of the saddle. And so this is what I call a partial reflock, meaning we're not reflocking and putting new flocking into the entire saddle, but we might be changing the panel of this saddle so it better mirrors the back of your horse. So the big differences that I can see in this saddle after we've done the adjustment is the biggest change is the not bouncing in the back of the saddle. So the saddle was a lot more level and a lot more quiet on the horse's back. And now Claire is sitting more in the middle of the saddle. Keeping in mind that this saddle is not Claire's saddle, this is the mare's saddle. And so it's not perfectly fitted for Claire, but now we've rebalanced it and now it sits flat front to back, it's staying in place, and now the pad's not getting eaten up into the gullet. So now we've got this fitting much better after its adjustment. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, you can find plenty more on our channel, or you can find us at saddlerysolutions.com.